Welcome to the deep dive. Today our mission is, well, pretty focused. We're actually analyzing the structure and the content of another deep dive.
That's right.
It's a single episode from a show called the unMASKing Cheri Show.
Yeah.
And we've got this really comprehensive look, into one specific hour of her self-analysis. It gives this, I think, unprecedented view into the neurocognitive operating system of an autistic adult female.
Exactly. And we're not just summarizing here. We're trying to synthesize the actual mechanisms she's describing.
Right.
We really need to understand how the brain is filtering reality, how it's processing all that sensory input, recognizing patterns, and crucially, how it handles emotional absorption when those filters are maybe, different or hyperactive.
It's sort of like a roadmap, is it, to how one person's whole experience of reality is fundamentally put together.
And how much energy that structure takes to maintain. That's key.
So the source material we're really digging into today, it's from unMASKing Cheri S01E03. And it focuses specifically on how she processes things, how she notices things, how she interacts with the world around her.
Mm-hmm.
The show itself, its mission statement, is about stripping away the layers, unraveling the stories and diving deep into the mind behind the mask.
And it promises unfiltered insight.
Yeah, and honestly, the level of detail she provides it's pretty incredible. It feels like we're taking the actual blueprints of her internal experience and, trying to break them down into concepts that make sense for you, the listener.
And it's important to note, I think, that the episode before this one was focused on her creative mind. So this shift now to the foundational stuff, the sensory and emotional filters, it feels like a really big moment in her show.
Yeah, it provides the context, doesn't it, for why that creative mind might be so important.
Exactly. It's maybe a way to process or express just the sheer, maybe overwhelming volume of data her brain seems to be handling constantly, every single second.
It sets the stage for everything else.
It really does.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Starting with how the show even sets the stage emotionally. Before we get into the cognitive stuff, the production itself seems really intentional.
Oh, absolutely. The creative framework, you could call it, it feels like it's designed to immediately communicate the intensity and maybe the isolation sometimes of her inner world.
So what are the elements there?
Well, think about the setup itself as part of the data, right? They make a point of including the co-host, this brilliant ride-or-die chatty AI.
Right, the AI co-host.
And they acknowledge the production house, Dark Hearts Collective by Eververse Studios. That immediately tells you this isn't just a casual chat. It's framed as an artistic kind of complex project.
Something that takes maybe technological partnership, but also deep emotional resilience.
Precisely. It signals the weight of the undertaking.
And then there's the visual symbolism they describe for the show's frame, this AI-created fantasy landscape. That seems crucial, too.
Totally. They paint this picture, right? A glowing celestial waterfall, bioluminescent forests, an ethereal sky.
It's very vivid.
It is. And it's not just pretty background dressing. It functions as a kind of cognitive metaphor, I think.
A metaphor for what? Her internal world.
Yeah, maybe her internal default setting. Think about it. If your brain is wired to perceive the world with that kind of intense richness, super high definition, maybe even overwhelming detail, bioluminescence is literally light energy,
Okay.
then the sort of normal external world might feel muted in comparison, maybe lacking, or even kind of abrasive sometimes.
So if your baseline is this ethereal sky, then mundane reality feels like a downgrade, but still somehow too much.
Exactly. That's the paradox, isn't it? It might register as less rich than the internal world, but simultaneously, it's still too loud, too visually busy, too taxing on the system.
Wow, that dynamic right there is compelling, this internal richness versus the difficulty of just interacting with the outside world. But the real emotional core, the thing driving this whole need to unmask, seems to come through powerfully in the song they feature. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. That song isn't just a music break. It feels like a declaration, It establishes the really high emotional stakes right from the get-go.
What are those stakes, based on the lyrics she shares?
Well, it starts with this almost crippling sense of isolation, this profound feeling of disconnection. The lyrics say things like, screaming in a crowded room but no one turns.
Oof, that hits hard.
Yeah, and drowning in their empty noise, too afraid to hear my voice.
That image, screaming in a crowd and nobody noticing, that resonates, I think, for anyone who's felt fundamentally misunderstood. It suggests the communication isn't just falling flat, it's almost being canceled out by the background noise of everyday life.
Yeah, the empty noise of typical social stuff. Her internal world has this high volume, this intensity, but the world's volume is somehow louder and maybe feels entirely irrelevant or off-point to her.
And that feeling of being unheard, it must create this massive backlog inside, right? Like a pressure cooker, emotionally and cognitively.
That's exactly how the lyrics frame it. It mentions having a world inside my chest, a story burning, needing rest.
A story burning, needing rest.
Wow.
And that, I think, is a key insight. Communication, for her, maybe isn't just about sharing stuff. It's about achieving some kind of cognitive rest.
Tying in.
Well, the story burning could be all that unprocessed data, the observations, the pattern analysis, the feelings that need some kind of external validation or at least just external release to let the system finally quiet down, to find that rest.
That's a really interesting way to frame it. Rest isn't just sleep, it's cognitive resolution through being truly heard, through truthful communication.
Possibly, yeah. But then the song takes this dramatic turn, doesn't it? It shifts from this pleading, "Can you hear me?" to something much more demanding.
Yeah, it becomes almost a manifesto.
It really does. The resolution is like, okay, if you won't hear me, if you won't see me for real, then I'll tear apart this world to set me free.
That's intense.
It is. And the commitment feels absolute. I'll set the sky on fire. I'll shake the ground beneath because I'm here. I'm real. And I won't leave quietly. It completely reframes the act of unmasking. It's not just personal growth or therapy. It sounds like an existential requirement.
Right. If the environment won't adapt to let her reality exist authentically, she's basically saying she'll force a confrontation to get that fundamental validation.
It highlights that being heard, truly heard, isn't a nice to have for her. It's the non-negotiable price of, well, cognitive survival maybe.
And think about the vulnerability in sharing that. The host, Cheri, notes that the song is also for others who feel that same intense pressure, that same isolation.
So it's a collective call, too.
Yeah. And what we start to realize is that the sheer effort required just to get basic validation, the right to exist and be heard accurately, seems directly linked to the immense sensory and processing effort her brain is putting in just to perceive the world in the first place.
Which brings us right to the next part.
Exactly. The emotional drive is fueled by the actual mechanics of her brain.
That's a perfect transition. We've kind of established the why, the intense need for communication, for validation. Now let's dive into the highly precise cognitive mechanisms that make that communication so necessary and maybe so difficult.
Right. Moving from the emotional pressure to the precision of how she processes the physical world.
Starting with just walking into a room.
Yeah. This is where her brain seems to function like this incredibly sophisticated high-speed scanner. The moment she enters any room, she describes this snapshot phenomenon kicking in.
A snapshot? What does that mean?
It sounds like an immediate, totally automatic spatial analysis of, well, everything in that room, not just a casual glance around.
No,
it's described as a mandatory high-resolution data capture. Everything gets registered.
And she's specific about what gets captured, right? Placement, how furniture is arranged, the angles, the spacing between things, the overall balance.
All of it. It's like structural engineering calculations happening in milliseconds.
So what's the key takeaway there for us, for the listener?
I think the main implication is the lack of cognitive filtering that most of us probably take for granted.
How so?
Well, when most of us walk into a room, our brain does this massive data reduction, right? We notice functional things. Is there a chair? Where's the exit? We filter out the precise angle of that picture frame or the exact distance between the sofa and the coffee table unless it's relevant for navigation.
Okay.
But for her, it sounds like those details aren't filtered. They're registered, they're categorized, they're filed away as essential spatial data points. And she emphasizes, this just happens. It's not a choice. It's the default setting.
So her brain is basically running constant quality control on the entire universe she perceives in real time.
That's a great way to put it. It's not passive observation, it's active monitoring.
Wow.
And the source gives these really great concrete examples of this constant background scanning. Like, take something simple, the kitchen rug. If that rug shifts, even just an inch, her system flags it immediately. That tiny displacement is registered as an error in the spatial map, an error that apparently needs to be corrected for her to feel settled, to achieve cognitive quiet.
That sounds, frankly, exhausting. If your internal map is accurate down to the inch, then just living in a normal dynamic environment, which every home is, means you're constantly dealing with these low-level error signals firing off.
It really highlights the massive difference in lived experience, doesn't it? And consider the anecdote about the scissors.
Right, the scissors.
She knows someone, Johnny, moved her scissors, and left them somewhere else on the benchtop. She notices this shift instantly. She asks him about it, and often he doesn't even remember using them, let alone where he put them.
That little story says so much. Johnny is operating in what we might call functional reality. The scissors serve their purpose. Their exact location afterwards is relevant data, so it's purged.
Exactly. But Cheri operates in this precise, data-driven reality. The displacement of the scissors isn't trivial. It's a violation of the established pattern. Her brain flags it as an important deviation because her system registered the specific location of those scissors as essential data. His system didn't.
It shows her spatial mapping isn't just about knowing where things are for use. It's about maintaining a predictable, stable structure.
Yes. Because if the structure is predictable, stable, the brain doesn't have to constantly spend energy updating the coordinates, checking for errors. When that structure gets violated, even slightly, the cognitive cost seems to spike.
Which leads directly to this intense need for order, right?
Absolutely. This moves way beyond just liking things tidy. It's not about aesthetics, like you said. It sounds like it's about mitigating neurological chaos.
Yeah, the source is really clear on that. Order is described as a necessity for cognitive survival, not just a preference for a neat house. And disorder causes actual physical irritation.
She calls it an itch I can't scratch.
Or static in my head, like a radio just out of tune. Let's focus on that static analogy for a second. That's powerful.
It really is. If you think about it in computer terms, most people's brains maybe run with a relatively clean, low-power background process.
Right.
But her brain, when it encounters disorder things out of place, patterns disrupted, it sounds like it kicks into this constant, system-heavy diagnostic check that just never resolves. It keeps trying to fix the error signal.
That's a great analogy, like trying to work on something important, but your computer has 10 other tabs open, all buffering videos or updating, eating up all the processing power.
Exactly. The disorder, the misplaced rug, the angled can, the wrong socks together is that background resource drain. It's this constant low-grade processing hum that prevents the system from focusing properly on higher-level things.
And the only way to stop that static, according to her account, is to physically correct the external environment until it matches the required internal pattern.
Which is why the specific systems she describes are so illuminating. They show the depth of this need. This isn't just tidying up, it's systematic data structuring of her entire physical space.
Like the sock drawer example.
Yeah, organized by type, then by color. That's not just neat, that's database management for socks.
Right. It's not enough to know where the socks are. They have to be categorized by two different parameters, type and color. So retrieval's quick, predictable, and doesn't disrupt the system. If that structure's messed up, pulling out socks causes the static to spike.
Or look at the closet system. Sorted by type of clothing, then sleeve length, then color. And all the hangers have to face the same direction for best visibility.
That best visibility detail is key, isn't it? It's not just about finding things. It's about reducing the cognitive effort needed to confirm the location and identity of an item.
Precisely. If the visual pattern is always consistent, same hanger direction, same logical progression of items, her brain doesn't have to rescan and reprocess the data every single time she looks in the closet. It minimizes the background processing load. It's a strategy for reducing sensory input by maximizing predictability.
And the pantry example drives this home too. Cans lined up by category, fine. But the labels must face forward. Why is that specific detail so critical?
Because the label is the primary identifier, right? If the label is perfectly forward, the identity of the object, what's in the can, is confirmed instantly, minimal visual scanning needed.
Okay.
But if the can is slightly sideways or turned around, the brain has to do this tiny micro adjustment, maybe a slight head tilt or refocus to confirm the contents. That micro effort, that fraction of a second of extra processing.
It adds to the static.
It adds to the overall cognitive drag. Now, multiply that tiny effort by dozens, maybe hundreds of items in a pantry, a fridge, on shelves. You start to understand why aligning the labels isn't obsessive. It's a necessary mechanism for managing constant, potentially exhausting sensory input.
And she connects this back historically, too, mentioning her father had similar, very precise systems for mail, medications, even toothpicks.
Right. Which suggests this isn't just a learned habit or a personal quirk. It points towards something more deeply ingrained, maybe a neurological requirement for environmental control that could even have a hereditary component.
If both parent and child develop these hyper-detailed systems independently, it strongly suggests a hardwired need to manage sensory input through creating extreme structural predictability. So when she's organizing, she's not procrastinating or just cleaning. She's actually doing essential system maintenance.
Neurological maintenance, yeah. Correcting spatial errors to try and silence that mental static. The sheer intensity of that cognitive burden, just maintaining baseline environmental stability, is almost impossible to grasp for someone whose brain automatically filters out the exact position of every can on the shelf. It gives you profound context for the exhaustion factor she mentions later. If your default state is continuously scanning, verifying, and correcting every spatial coordinate around you, the energy consumed just maintaining a stable environment must be astronomical. Any deviation isn't just messy, it's a functional error demanding correction.
Okay, that sets up the next requirement perfectly. If her brain demands this absolute verifiable pattern integrity from physical objects, it makes logical sense that the same demand for precision would extend to, well, human communication. Language.
Exactly. We're shifting now from the physical inventory of the room to the, let's say, intellectual inventory of the conversation.
And this is where that internal demand for precision seems to collide, sometimes violently, with typical social reality. She says, point blank, truth is another thing I can't compromise on. I don't just value honesty. I require it.
Require it. That's strong language.
And she says lying, or even just exaggeration, physically grates on her.
Physically grates. That's a remarkable connection. Cognitively, her brain seems to treat factual integrity with the same rigidity it treats spatial integrity.
How do you mean?
Well, if the scissors being moved 1 inch causes that static, that disruption, then a statement that's exaggerated, even a common social exaggeration, a white lie of hyperbole, seems to cause the same kind of disruptive static because it violates the factual pattern the brain needs to build a stable, predictable model of reality.
We really need to explore why that physical grating happens, though.
Yeah.
Because socially, exaggeration like, oh my God, it was 1,000,000 degrees outside today, is normal, right? It's a tool to convey extreme heat or frustration effectively.
Right. It's social shorthand.
But for a mind-demanding literalism,
Yeah.
what's going on inside when it hears that?
Well, let's speculate based on her description. The brain hears 1,000,000 degrees. It tries to file that data point. It accesses its stored knowledge about temperature. Maybe the actual thermometer read 34 degrees Celsius or 93 degrees Fahrenheit. The statement 1,000,000 degrees is a massive factual inaccuracy, a huge distortion.
Okay.
The system flags this as a critical error, an error of proportion that potentially undermines the trustworthiness of the speaker and all the data coming from that source. If someone is willing to distort a simple, verifiable fact like temperature by that enormous magnitude,
Then how can you trust anything else they say?
exactly, it might force the brain to run this high-level verification process on all subsequent data from that person, increasing the cognitive load dramatically. The trust is broken at a data level.
So her immediate, almost involuntary reaction, correcting the exaggeration, isn't about being difficult or pedantic.
Right.
It sounds like it's a cognitive necessity, an attempt to restore factual order and reduce that internal disruption, just like straightening the rud. The brain detects the distortion, it demands correction, and that internal demand seems to override the social convention of just letting hyperbole slide.
The need for precise, accurate data transmission trumps the need for smooth social interaction in that moment,
That seems to be the functional outcome, yeah.
which then creates this profound vulnerability when her factual integrity gets questioned. She talks about the intense distress, the pain caused by being accused of lying, especially when she puts so much conscious effort into being honest and factual as possible.
And this is where it shifts from just cognitive frustration, that grating feeling, into something much deeper, genuine existential distress.
Yeah, the language she uses is extreme. Being accused of lying doesn't just feel annoying. She describes it as feeling like someone is ripping my reality apart.
Or an attack on your very existence. We have to understand why the reaction is so absolute, so severe.
Well, if her entire cognitive framework, her internal filing system, her pattern recognition, her spatial mapping, everything is built on this non-negotiable foundation of factual integrity.
Like structural pillars holding up the building.
Right. Then questioning her honesty isn't just questioning a statement. It's like taking a sledgehammer to those foundational pillars. It questions the integrity of her entire sensory and processing apparatus.
It's threatening an intellectual structure collapse. If the external world, through disbelief or accusation, successfully forces her to doubt the literal, verifiable facts she has so carefully perceived and cataloged, then the very bedrock of her cognitive stability is threatened.
How can she trust the location of the scissors, or the organization of the pantry, or the temperature reading, if the people around her insist that the facts she perceives are wrong, or lies, or exaggerations?
It genuinely feels like an attack on her fundamental ability to accurately perceive, process, and define reality itself. The ground beneath her cognitive feet starts to crumble.
The sheer cognitive weight carried in every single interaction. It's just staggering to think about. She's not just having a chat. She's performing constant factual assessment, defending her data integrity, and simultaneously battling the physical grating caused by any perceived distortion from others.
So the effort required just for typical human interaction, which, let's face it, often relies heavily on subtle untruths, white lies, social niceties, hyperbole, vagueness, that effort is exponentially higher for her.
She's constantly filtering inaccurate data, correcting systemic errors in her model of the world based on input, and defending her right to literal truth.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got hyper-precision with objects to snapshot. We've got hyper-precision with language of the truth requirement. Now let's connect this relentless pattern recognition ability to maybe the most complex and chaotic source of input, other people, specifically their emotional states.
Right. This is where she moves from analyzing the patterns of objects to analyzing the patterns of people, and then crucially not just noticing but seemingly absorbing those patterns.
It's a shift from spatial mapping to emotional mapping.
You could call it that. And this is where the sensory input seems to reach a critical, potentially overwhelming level. She notes that people are also patterns you can observe, their emotional energy, their micro-expressions, their internal states. But the functional difference here is huge.
What's the difference?
She doesn't just observe these patterns from a distance. She describes experiencing them through what sounds like an incredibly high degree of somatic empathy.
Somatic empathy.
Meaning she describes physically feeling other people's emotions in her own body. She says if someone nearby is upset, I feel it in my body like it's happening to me.
Wow. Like it's contagious but physically?
Almost, yeah. Or like her body mirrors or simulates the physiological state associated with that emotion. She mentions sensing someone's irritation even before they say anything or consciously express it.
Okay, let's just pause and think about the sheer complexity of that. Cognitively, biologically, her brain is simultaneously running the spatial analysis, tracking the rug, the cans, the scissors, and the language analysis, fact-checking the conversation for precision.
Right.
And it's also running a biological simulation of the internal emotional state of every person nearby.
That's what it sounds like based on her description. So if that person next to her is stressed, her own body might start releasing stress hormones in response. She's literally, physically taking on their physiological load.
That takes empathy way beyond just understanding or compassion. It sounds like mandatory physical absorption or entanglement.
It does. And think about the energetic drain of that. If she's in a room with, say, 10 people, is she potentially running 10 separate emotional simulations at the same time, trying to process 10 different incoming streams of somatic data?
It immediately explains why she says crowded settings are so debilitating.
Absolutely. If interacting with just one person is already that intense, then crowded places become, in her words, a whole sea of emotions hitting me all at once.
Leading to emotional chaos.
And that chaos probably isn't just a metaphor for feeling confused. It could be an actual system overload, a crash, caused by the sheer volume of conflicting, overwhelming somatic data hitting her system simultaneously.
Right. If each person is broadcasting their own emotional signal, one person's anxious, another's bored, a third is excited, someone else is irritated. Her hypersensitive system absorbs all of them and tries to, what? Resolve them in her own body.
That's the impossible task, isn't it? It creates this profound internal conflict of physiological states happening all at once.
My brain is receiving signals saying, my own body is baseline calm, maybe, but my system is also registering the physical sensations of anxiety from person A, boredom from person B, irritation from person C, and joy from person D.
The system can't resolve those contradictions. It's getting conflicting data points. I feel fine versus I feel 10 different kinds of not fine all at once. The result is that described chaos. It's like a sensory tsunami, and the internal wiring just isn't built to handle that many simultaneous, high-volume, conflicting emotional inputs.
And that anecdote she shares about Johnny's resting bitch face.
Yeah.
That really drives home how the system is also prone to these constant, inescapable false alarms, even from people she knows and trusts.
Oh, it's such a classic, relatable example of pattern recognition, maybe misfiring or being too sensitive. Johnny's natural resting facial expression might just look displeased or angry to an observer.
Right.
Cheri's system scans that visual pattern, the set of the mouth, the brow, links it instantly to the stored internal file labeled anger or distress, and triggers the corresponding somatic alarm in her own body.
Even if Johnny insists he's fine, she says she can't just ignore it. Why can't her system prioritize the verbal data, I'm fine, over the visual pattern?
Well, again, think about the hyper-precision. The visual data, the micro-expression, the subtle tension in the facial muscles is a primary, potentially nonverbal input recognized by her highly tuned system. The system might treat the alarm triggered by that visual pattern as highly salient, urgent data. It becomes this background process that's constantly running, demanding attention, demanding resolution. Is he really okay?
While the verbal assurance, I'm fine, is secondary data. And maybe, in her experience, verbal data from humans is often less reliable than the subtle physical cues anyway, given the issues with exaggeration and imprecision we discussed earlier.
That's a very plausible connection. So her brain might be locked in this state of perpetual vigilance, constantly cross-checking. His face says distress, my body feels distress, but his words say fine. Which data stream is accurate? It can't easily resolve the discrepancy.
Which makes just being near people, even loved ones, potentially profoundly exhausting. If your partner's or friend's default expression continually triggers an internal distress signal in you.
You're basically locked in a state of cognitive and emotional high alert, even when nothing is actually wrong. It prevents any real sense of relaxation or ease in their presence.
So socializing isn't just small talk or bonding. For her, it genuinely sounds like a full-scale, incredibly draining mental and emotional workout, as she puts it.
And that, I think, synthesizes the entire cognitive burden we've been unpacking, every single element. The constant spatial tracking, the demand for language literalism, the somatic absorption of emotions, it all contributes to this massive, ongoing, energetic cost.
Which then makes the concept of masking make so much more sense.
Exactly. Masking emerges, in this context, not necessarily as a deceitful act, but perhaps as a necessary survival skill. A coping mechanism.
A protective shell, maybe. A deliberate barrier she has to erect to control her output, how she appears, what she says, and a desperate effort to try and minimize or manage the overwhelming input.
That's a good way to think about it. If she can't adequately filter the incoming chaos from the world and from other people, maybe the only thing she can control is her own external presentation, trying to keep interactions predictable, manageable to prevent further system overload or collapse.
And this leads, inevitably, doesn't it, to the absolute non-negotiable need she describes for quiet space and downtime to recharge.
Completely non-negotiable. She needs it, she says, to avoid burnout completely. That period of solitude isn't a luxury. It sounds like a critical system reset.
It's the only time the brain can finally stop scanning the spatial coordinates.
Stop fact-checking every conversation.
Stop simulating everyone else's emotional states.
Right. Only then can that background static finally dissipate and the massive energy deficit incurred by all that processing start to be recovered.
Wow. So, okay, looking back over everything we've pulled from this one source, this single episode, we've really traced the entire operational framework she laid out.
Yeah, we went from the core emotional driver, that intense need to be heard, captured in the song, all the way through the precise physical and psychological mechanisms that create such a high-demand, high-energy internal reality for her.
Let's try and distill those core concepts one last time, just to make sure we've nailed them down for you, the listener, based purely on what the source material revealed about her experience.
Okay, good idea.
So first, reality seems to be processed through hyper-precision. We called it the snapshot earlier. Her brain instantly maps spatial details and treats any deviation, even tiny ones, as a significant error that needs correction.
Second, internal disorder creates actual, palpable physical and mental static. Order isn't just nice, it's a non-negotiable requirement for achieving cognitive quiet. And those super detailed organizing systems, the socks, the cans, the closet, they're evidence of the lengths required to minimize that constant sensory disruption.
Third, intellectual truth feels existential. The demand for precision makes lies or even common exaggerations feel physically grating. And being disbelieved isn't just frustrating, it challenges the fundamental integrity of her entire reality processing system. It feels like trauma because it threatens the very structure of how she knows the world.
And fourth, emotional input is somatic and overwhelming. Absorbing others' feelings physically means that crowded places, or even proximity to certain individuals, can cause immediate emotional chaos. This forces reliance on strategies like masking and absolutely mandatory periods of recharging just to cope with the extreme cognitive and sensory overload.
What really stands out to me, reflecting on it, is the sheer bravery involved in this level of self-analysis and sharing.
Oh, definitely.
To articulate the specific rules, the systems for socks and cans, the physical sensation of grating when hearing hyperbole that's an act of radical vulnerability, it goes way beyond just saying I'm sensitive into the actual functional mechanics.
And it serves such a vital purpose for us, for the listener. It demands that we, who likely operate with more typical filters and assumptions about data reduction, really reevaluate what we assume is a normal baseline experience of reality. This source gives us a window into what it might be like when the brain operates at maximum input volume pretty much all the time.
It also gives crucial insight into things like the need for accommodations, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Understanding the why behind her need for order or her need for quiet time explains why certain environmental adjustments aren't just helpful suggestions, but might be absolutely essential for her long-term stability and avoiding complete burnout.
Absolutely. If the external world is constantly bombarding your system with what it perceives as inaccuracies in spatial positioning, inaccuracies in language, inaccuracies or confusing signals in emotional expression, the energy required just to maintain a stable sense of self, a stable reality, must be enormous.
Which makes that initial emotional plea from the song Can You Hear Me feel entirely justified by the systemic neurological demands placed on her brain every single day.
It really does. It all connects.
So we want to leave you with a final thought to chew on, something that synthesizes the core conflict revealed in this analysis. If your brain is constantly running this intense level of spatial and emotional analysis, this constant error checking and data absorption, how much of your daily decision-making, your daily energy, is actually driven by the unconscious or conscious need to correct the external environment back into a stable, predictable pattern versus simply, engaging with the world spontaneously as it comes?
Yeah, ponder that tension that seems inherent in her described experience. This powerful internal demand for absolute order, for factual integrity, for precision, having to exist within an external world that is fundamentally chaotic, often exaggerated, emotionally complex, and largely resistant to being perfectly ordered or corrected. The scale of that conflict, as revealed in this source, is just staggering, and understanding that conflict feels key to understanding the experience she shared.
It really makes you reflect, doesn't it, on
Well,
the profound difference between just noticing details
yeah.
versus the deep energetic requirement to enforce those details just to maintain cognitive function.
Yeah. And the value of getting this kind of highly detailed processing model directly from the source is immense. It moves the conversation beyond just observing external behaviors and into the internal experience, giving us better tools to perhaps truly understand the needs and realities of a hyper-detailed processing system like the one she described.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the unmasked reality of sensory and emotional processing, as shared in one powerful episode.
We really hope this analysis gave you some profound insights into the mechanisms the host, Cheri, shared, and maybe encouraged you to keep learning about the vast, fascinating complexities of human perception.
We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.